listener production.
I'm automotive commentator and journalist Greg Rust, and this is Rusty's Garage. I'm in New Zealand for this episode, south of Auckland, near Hamilton, at a racetrack called Hampton Downs. I'm here for their annual Motorfest, a celebration of motorcycle racing with some priceless classic bikes, legendary riders, and some engineers from this part of the world who rose to the top because of their never-give-up, innovative, can-do approach. Among the international riders is Steve Parrish. Whenever I catch up with Steve, it reminds me of my old colleague, two-time 500cc world champion Barry Sheene. They were teammates for a time and became the best of friends. Stavros, as Baz called him, lives life to the full. He's not PC and makes no apologies for it. And there'll be some stories here that might raise an eyebrow or two. Don't email me complaining. Just enjoy it for what it is and keep it in the context of the era he raced in. He's one of the most genuine blokes I know who just likes taking it to the edge, especially for a laugh. The path to bikes and racing wasn't that of a single-minded young man growing up in England.
I am, Rusty, probably, truthfully, keeping out of the UK for as long as possible during the winter months. But I also love the classic scene. I've recently been in South Africa, where I was out there. I took my wife, actually. That was... We got married a year ago, and I told her that was our honeymoon because we hadn't had one before. But we've been in South Africa riding RG 500 classic bikes down there and had a wonderful time. And then I get the invitation to come back here to Hampton Downs in New Zealand, which is really strange because generally the only invitation to come back a second time is to apologise, but they actually wanted me back.
Let's start with just the classic scene for a moment. I mean, it's gone through this sort of resurgence. Tell us about the bike you're riding for this weekend, for example, and the memories that evokes for you.
Well, some of the memories, of course, are laying in hospitals wondering who I am. Because that, of course, was part and parcel of what went on. And it is going through a resurgence. And I mean, possibly it's not good for the motorcycle industry because a lot of people that go and watch motorcycle racing are of the age of 50, 55. That's kind of the average age. And so, of course, they have great memories. The smell of the two-stroke oil from the back of Barry Sheene and Kenny Roberts's and Mick Grant's and Stuart Vaughan's and people like that. That's etched in their minds. And it was a halcyon period, I think, of Grand Prix racing. And so that's, I think, is why people want to come along and see them. And I have actually this weekend been riding a bike that's owned by Tom Dermody, a lovely Irishman that lives up in Brisbane. And Stuart Vaughan has a lot to do with it, and they bring the bike out for me, and it's prepared beautifully. Mike Sinclair is there working at Paul Treacy, and all these great engineers from the past.
Legends. They're legends too, behind the scenes, but they are.
Yeah, very much so. I remember last year at Eastern Creek, I had Jeremy Burgess there. Wow, if I'd have had those engineers when I was racing, I could have been good, I think. Because they're just such nice people. And a bit like riders of that era, they're not just engineers, they're characters, they're people. They've got stories and world championships behind them. That's the thing. And they still love what they're doing. There's, if I'd say we need to change the jetting on this, they kind of jump at it, and which is unbelievable, bearing in mind that some of them are 50, 60 years old, and so that's also really nice about it. And I guess also we've got time to stop and talk to the people that come in that are also from that era. And the garage we've been in here at Hampton Downs has a footprint that goes through the middle of it, asking and inviting spectators to come along and talk and look and see these bikes, touch them. We've got Graham Crosby, Christopher Mullen, Simon Crafar, legends that are here to talk to people and have their picture taken and everything else. So surely that's why you've got to love classic racing, because I love MotoGP, but boy oh boy, I can tell you, when you go to Qatar next weekend or you go to Jerez or something like that, if you can get within 200 metres of the paddock, you're doing really well. And the chance of seeing Valentino Rossi, it might be in the distance by a quarter of a mile away. So that's the difference with classic racing.
Where did the love of bikes come from for Steve Parrish? And I want to hark back to your childhood, where you grew up, and were you a kid that was obsessed by a particular bike? Maybe you had a poster on the wall, or was it a particular racer? I think back for Barry, it was Bill Ivey, I think.
You're right. Yeah, it was. No, To start with, not at all. I mean, I didn't even know motorcycle racing existed. I guess I was 10 years old, I'm assuming, and I got invited round to a friend's house, and his dad had built him an old motorbike, and he let me have a go on it, and within 10 minutes I was hooked on this thing. I always like going fast on my bicycle, and then finally I get something with an engine underneath me, and I mucked around with that, and then I got myself a bike, and luckily I lived out in the countryside, not far from Cambridge in the UK, and there was an old disused airfield. But for me, you know, Rusty, it wasn't just a motorbike. It was something with an engine. It was something that could propel me along. And sometimes it could be a pickup truck, it could be a car, it could be a motorbike, it could be a scooter, anything that I could get on and start it up, make a noise and go fast was all I was interested in. And then I never, ever imagined I'd become a motorcycle racer. I really didn't. I got expelled from school.
What for?
Well, I actually got expelled from primary school. I don't know what you call it over here, but it was like you up to 11 years old. And then
Same thing.
Right, primary school. I got expelled from that because Mrs. Wilson, who was the head teacher, she didn't like me and I didn't like her. And I can understand why she didn't like me. And a lot of people say I'm hard to dislike but worth the effort. So, and I wrote on the school wall, Mrs. Wilson is a fat old cow or something, but I spelt it all correctly and everything else. But anyway, they still expelled me. And then I went to a senior school. And then that went wrong when I was 15 because Mr. Carruthers, my geography teacher, had a Triumph Herald and he didn't like me and I didn't like him. So one day I decided at lunch break it'd be really cool to take his hubcaps off and take his wheel nuts off and put his hubcaps back on. And you can imagine I gathered everyone up at 5 o'clock when he was about to go home because I was usually in detention anyway, so I was still there. And it was the funniest thing I've ever seen because all his wheels fell off immediately and they grasped me up and that was the end of my schooling. So at this point I'm now having to go and do an apprenticeship because what else can a 15-year-old kid do?
In what?
In agricultural engineering. I went to work for a local company that mended Massey Ferguson tractors and things like that. But then when I got 16 years old, I got myself a bike and off I went on the road. Loved it, a YD-S3 Yamaha. About a week later, I passed my test and I get a 650 BSA and things like that. And how I stayed alive, I've no idea. You know, back then, shows how old I am. You didn't even have to wear a crash helmet. And I'd be hurtling around the lanes of near Cambridge at these bikes and skidding around. And it was part of me. It was I don't know why, it was just inbuilt in me. Motorcycles were a love because I guess it was independence. They went fast and they made a nice noise. And then I went about a year without a motorbike. I had a car, and that was better for the girls, of course.
What was that first car?
The first car was Morris 1000. Yeah, I mean, can you believe it?
Stylish.
Yes, very, very stylish. And I rolled it in the ditch a few times. I remember one of the first accidents I had 5 in a Morris 1000. We ended up upside down in a ditch. No one was hurt until someone said, I smelled petrol. And there was such a screaming and shouting to get out. We all got stung to bits by all the nettles that were in the ditch. So that was the worst injury. And so that kind of went on. But then all of a sudden, on my way to work, and often the Morris 1000 had broken down. I had no wheels, or my motorbike had broken down. I used to walk to work from the bus station. And there was a guy that raced motorbikes, and his name was David Brown, and he raced a Triumph engine and a Norton frame, and I used to poke my head in there and look around, and he invited me in. And then he asked me if I wanted to go to a race meeting. I went along to Snetterton, and I cleaned his wheels and fetched his petrol and did things like that. I thought, this is for me. I was all of a sudden surrounded by all these lovely old motorbikes and people that sort of thought like I did, weren't real bright like I wasn't. And that was it. I thought I'd have a go at racing. So I built a bike with a group of mates from a local pub, and we built this, again, a Triton, went off to Brands Hatch, finished completely last. And Brands Hatch is still slippery to this day because of my Triton. So much oil came out of it. And it's ground into the track now, I think. And I remember pulling in last, and the cylinders were going up and down, and oil was coming out everywhere. And we called our team, we had on the side of this old comma van that was a greengrocery van, called Porous Racing, because there was so much oil coming out, it was porous, and porous piss, because we had no money. So that was Porous Racing, and that was the name of the team. But it was really like a pub team. Instead of having a darts team, they had a motorbike team, and I was the rider. It progressed from there, and I got a better bike, and a friend bought me a better bike. He had more money than I did. And I started winning amateur racing. Still had no idea I was ever going to do it because I was still...
How did it click then? What clicked for you to get from that guy who was struggling to being a racer that was proper and winning?
One of my mates suggested that I bought a better bike because these old British bikes, British bikes were finished really, but I could only afford that. So I saved up, someone helped me, my mum lent me £200, and I went out and I bought a 250 Yamaha, TD2B Yamaha, and all of a sudden I was winning. I couldn't believe it, because I didn't know I was any good, because you're battling around with an old bike leaking oil. I had no idea whether I was good or bad. And all of a sudden I jumped on this bike, which had got a reasonable pedigree, and I went out for the first race, and instead of battling around in 28th position, I was in second position, third position. Wow, this is impressive. Did that for a couple of years with my mates, living in the back of transit vans and sleeping rough and things like that. And a lovely gentleman called Harold Coppott, who was a retired chicken farmer from Oxfordshire, sold his chicken farm for land to build houses on, saw me in the paddock with this old bike, and it was still quite old, but I was winning on it. He said, I reckon you could do better on a better bike. Lent me a 250, 350 TZ 250, TZ 350 Yamaha, which was unbelievable. Lent me a van as well, and all of a sudden I had this big van, well, say a fairly big van with Harold Coppott written on the side, and I was part of a three-man team, Mick Patrick and Wayne Dinham and myself. And that really broke me into the national scene. Started winning national races, meeting people. All of a sudden, by then, I'm starting to look at motorcycle racing. And I was exactly as you said. I had a poster of Barry Sheene on the wall. I had Giacomo Agostini on the wall, and all these famous people. So I'm now buying Motorcycle News, but still didn't think I could ever make a living out of it. I really had no idea. Anyway, after a year or so with Harold Coppott, I then get a gentleman come up to me called Dave Moore, who was a builder from Guildford, and he said, look, 250s, 350s are great, but no one really notices them. Then you need to be on a bigger bike. You need to be on a 750 or a 500, because that's the class that all the factory teams are going to look at and things like that. So he went out and spent all his money, and it really did break him, buying a 500 RG 500, hence I have such a love for these bikes.
A legendary bike in that period.
Yeah, and they were hard to come by. But he managed to secure one through, it would have been Suzuki Great Britain, and a TZ 750 Yamaha. So all of a sudden I've got these bikes. So I went out and I won the British Championship straight off the bat on these two bikes. And it was like, all of a sudden then, that was when it clicked that maybe I could give up work, which was, and in fact, I am now, to this day, celebrating 43 years without a proper job. And I'm hoping to never get one, really.
But, I mean, you turn effectively, the way you're talking, pro at about what age?
19, 20? Yeah, 19, 20, I guess, something like that. It would have been, let me think, 76. Yeah, about 20, 21, maybe, something like that, yeah.
And a year later, help me with the timeline here, about a year later, you are teammate in the 500cc World Championship to Barry Sheene, who you talked about a moment ago. I mean, that's surreal stuff.
Yeah, it was very short. And in fact, I failed to mention that during the time riding my 250 and 350, so that's going to be, I guess, 74, 75, I met Barry Sheene, who's obviously a hero, and he'd got everything. And a bit like Barry, his hero was Bill Ivey. Sadly, Bill Ivey got killed, and because he liked Bill Ivey because he had fast cars and smart women and everything else like this. So I'd sort of at that period worked out that if I raced a motorbike and kept my helmet on, I could probably get better girlfriends, and in the end I did. But I met Barry at an event called Stars of Tomorrow, and that would have helped me up the ladder, I guess. And I went to this event, I won about 3 races, and Barry came over to me, and I didn't win it. I finished second. He said, I don't know who the other guys were looking at. I had you down to win this flat out. And I'm really sort of puffing my chest out and thinking it's good, but I'm not too sure whether he actually meant that or he wanted to get off of my girlfriend. So, to this day, I've never worked that one out. But anyway, we hit it off straight away. I realised that he lived quite close to where I was living, and so we then kept in contact at this point. And for sure, then when Dave Moore, and I jumped back again, bought the RG 500, I started racing with him in 500cc races in the UK, and this is starting to get surreal. You're absolutely right. And at the time, 1976, when I had my RG private bike, he had a team. It was Barry Sheene head team, John Newbold and John Williams, 3 riders in the team. And I started getting second to Barry in front of his teammates on the factory bikes. So Barry goes straight to the boss of Suzuki Great Britain and says, you want to have a look at this guy, Steve Parrish? And I'd won the British Championship. And then I get this ridiculous phone call. You know when you sometimes get a phone call and you think someone's winding you up?
Yes.
And I get a phone call from Maurice Knight from Suzuki Great Britain. Are you interested in being Barry Sheene's teammate to do Grand Prix in 77?
Go on, who is this?
Yeah, come on, stop mucking around. Who is this going to be? No, seriously, and I think he sent me a fax, which were around in those days, and I get this fax coming through, and I'm showing my girlfriend and stuff like that, and sure enough, that was it. And I didn't even ask how much money I was going to get paid. I'd have paid them, actually. But I think I got £5,000 or something, and Barry would have been on 60, 70, I don't know, whatever. I didn't really care. And that was it. That was when, boy, oh boy, you know, I am going to go racing a motorcycle around the Grand Prix. And I'd never been abroad, really. I'd been to France on the ferry. I swear to you, I'd never been on an aeroplane at this point. And my first round in 77 was the Venezuelan Grand Prix, you know, and there I am. I don't know what's going on. I'm just wet behind the ears and just sapping it up and absorbing it. My education started in 1977, so I forget all the years previously. And I'm still, you know, I'm a bit dyslexic, I guess you say. I can kind of get by, but I do regret not probably spending a bit more time at school. And I know I'm only saying this for the kids out there, but truthfully, my life would have been easier had I have probably educated myself a little bit better. It's my own fault, but I made up for it with other things. So then, yeah, bam, I'm doing Grand Prix with Barry Sheene. And one of the things that in 77 that came home to me, it was the Belgium Grand Prix, and I still giggle to myself. I'm at Spa, never been there before, and we didn't get a lot of practice sessions, so I never qualified that high up, but I always got faster and faster as the race went on. And we're on the long track at Spa, and I'm battling for the front 3 or 4 places. There was Barry and Michel Rougeray, and that was the very famous race, which is still to this day the fastest ever Grand Prix average lap, and it was like 133 miles an hour average or something like that. But I'm battling now with Giacomo Agostini, Pat Hennon, who was my sort of teammate as well, and Johnny Cicotto, and all these names of people. And there was so much slipstreaming went on back then on the long track, and you would pass someone and then they would pass you and you would pass them, and it was all slipstreaming and stuff like that. And I would go creeping past Giacomo Agostini on the Yamaha he was, and I'd look in and I'm thinking, that's the guy I've got on the wall. He's my poster man and 15 times world champion. And he'd be looking back at me thinking, who the bloody hell is that? Because I never heard of me. I could see him looking, who the hell is it? And that, yeah, it was just dreams, you know, just absolutely living the dream. I probably still am, but it was wonderful, unbelievable.
I mean, you were there, with Barry, he's winning world championships. He was helping to transform, in several ways, motorcycle racing as it emerged really into this kind of professional sport. People south of the equator, I mean, he was loved in Australia when he moved there, became integral to Channel 9 and Channel 10's motorsport coverage. But we maybe don't fully appreciate, he was in Europe and in England, he was a rock star.
Yeah, he was. I think probably when I first got my professional job with Suzuki in '77, still very, very small sport in the UK. And you turn up somewhere. What do you do for a living? Well, I race motorcycles. And they couldn't really comprehend what scrambling, I think it was called then. What do you mean race motorcycles? I'd just say Barry Sheene. Ah, right, got it. And I think now you'd probably find certain people that race nowadays. What do you do for a living? I'm MotoGP. They've got no idea what it is. You say Valentino Rossi. So that was where he was. He was the guy that was the link, the key. And once you said that, all of a sudden they want to know you, because it might be a way of getting to know Barry Sheene. And I think back then, all the guys wanted to be Barry Sheene and all the girls wanted to be with Barry Sheene. That was kind of how it was. And he was the guy that took motorcycle racing in the Northern Hemisphere, and certainly in the UK, from the back pages to the front pages. He went out of the sports pages into the front pages because he had a television show. He was hooked up with Stephanie Sheen, a top model. He was big mates with people like George Best from football. You needed anything, he was the man. He preceded Google. Like you needed to know it.
Sorted, couldn't he?
You could fix it, and you didn't go into Google to find out who to get anywhere. You just phone up Barry, and he had a little black book, and you needed tickets for this or needed to meet someone, and hence he opened up my life. And a lot of people said, Steve Parrish, all he's ever done is been in Barry Sheene's slipstream. Well, trust me, it was a heck of a slipstream, not just on the track, all over the place. It was just whatever, I just followed him through, and I was happy to be in his slipstream. It was like, it just opened up so many doors for me. And sadly, at the end of 77, I get fired. But I was used to it, chucked out of primary school, senior school, everything else, so I'm now being fired again. It was a bit my own fault. Suzuki Great Britain cut back, and I crashed whilst leading the British Grand Prix, and so I finished 5th in the World Championship, which I thought was pretty good going, my first ever year doing Grand Prix. But my team, there was 3 of us, Barry, Pat Hennon and I, and Pat Hennon finished in 3rd place in the championship. Barry won it. Suzuki cut back, so there was no position for me. But Barry, pretty much on the phone, gets George Harrison from the Beatles to put some money up, and then Makaha skateboards, because that was all the rage at the time. And so
George had an interest in, I think, didn't he? Is that right?
Sorry?
George had an interest in that, didn't he? In the skateboard companies?
I think he probably did. George had an interest in all sorts of things. And I got to meet all the Monty Python peoples, because I don't know if many people know, but George funded Life of Brian that the Monty Python people did. And I'm jumping off piste here, but if you ever watch Life of Brian, if you like all that, George Harrison is actually in it because he funded it all. Anyway, so 78, I actually had a bigger budget, had more money than I had with the factory Suzuki team, because George said, come on down to the offices and don't worry, Stavros, I'll sort you out with a mud garden, a petrol tank and some tyres. They gave me a cheque for £55,000 in 1978. I could have gone and bought 3 houses, I think. So I bought myself a couple of RG500s. One of the bikes Suzuki's let me have from the year before, a 750cc Yamaha, because Suzuki didn't make a big bike, and off I went racing and did okay again. I won the 500 British Championship, Shell Sport Championship, in fact beating Barry in that, which I was dead proud of. So 79 comes around and they re-employed me, so I'm now back in the fold. But I have to say 79 was a horrible year, not just for me, but our 3 teammates. Pat Hennon sadly had a huge accident in the Isle of Man in 78, so that was finished his racing career. 79 starts off, Barry Sheene, Steve Parrish and Tom Heron. In May, Tom Heron of that year was killed at the Northwest 200, so I broke my wrist at the first round. Barry ended up with some virus and he wasn't fit and healthy. So 79 was kind of a year to forget, and history tells it, Barry left Yamaha, Suzuki, and went to Yamaha in 1980. I got fired again, but I didn't care because I was used to all that, and got some more sponsorship. So I had a kind of those 3 years, 78, 79, 77, 78, 79 were kind of, I crammed an awful lot into that, with triumphs and tragedy, and we look back at that period being the halcyon period and all the fun times, but it was like a war zone. That's why we lived it to its fullest. You know, every day was precious, and you got up thinking, well, I'm still here today, let's make the most of it, because people were getting killed left, right and centre. It was on average 5 or 6 a year, and I could, when I wrote the book on Barry, and my book just recently, I could name 23 mates I lost over that period, and that is kind of crazy, really.
Crazy, and thankfully safety's improved a lot in racing. I want to come back on a couple of things here. Firstly, to George Harrison. What the heck was it like hanging out with the Beatle? And he was, he was instrumental in helping Barry move to Australia, and he was a proper race fan, mate.
Yeah, he loved Formula One, big mates with James Hunt and people like that, travelled around a great deal, and like anyone, if you like Formula One, you've got to like motorcycle racing. He sort of trended through that. And I think Barry got to meet him at Long Beach. They did a demonstration race at Long Beach, and that's where Barry hooked up with him. And yeah, it was. Eric Idle would come along at the races and all these famous people. And yeah, I mean, I'm walking around like dribbling, really, and seeing all these famous people. And wherever you went, you bumped into famous people and went to nightclubs in London. And it was absurd, really. I look back on it thinking, I wish, you know, nowadays we walk around with a phone with a camera and things like that, and I've hardly got any memories of all that because you didn't kind of take it all in. So yeah, it was rather special. And one story always made me laugh. I said to George Harrison one day, was Ringo the best drummer in the UK? He said he wanted him the best drummer in the Beatles.
Let's talk a couple of 500cc stories. Firstly, and I've had a discussion with Mark Scaife about this at Bathurst once. He once cheekily subbed for another driver to ensure they could qualify for the race. And you kind of dressed up as Barry Sheene at one point and helped him qualify while he was injured. Share that yarn with us.
Yeah, it was absolutely true. That was in 77 at the Post TT, and it was a one-day event. And Barry had all sorts of problems with his legs, and you'll know that because he had all sorts of accidents with his legs. And he'd broken his legs quite badly in Daytona in 75 and had them pinned and screwed and everything else. We get to Mallory Park, and I don't know what he'd been up to the night before. Hadn't been drinking or anything, but all of a sudden he went to get off the bike after the free practice in the morning. And in one of his legs, his right leg locked up, and he couldn't get off the bike, so I had to lift him off the bike. And if he didn't do the qualifying at 12 o'clock, he wouldn't have been able to do the race. And he felt that it could be unlocked if he went to see a chiropractor or an osteopath or something. So they whizzed him off out the track under a blanket because they didn't want to everyone see Barry Sheene leaving the circuit and everything else. So Franco in the old Rolls-Royce Shadow smoked off out the paddock, taking him to find a chiropractor in the local town of Leicester. And Rex White, the team manager, sheepishly came up to me and said, "Look, Steve, we need a big favour from you." And it was like he was going to try and coax me to do it. "Would you mind putting Barry's leathers on, helmet, gloves, boots, getting on his number 7 bike that was already fixed up for him, with Franco having it all ready, and it would have been his mechanic Don there, and Martin Ogborn from Suzuki's, just doing 3 laps to qualify him. Doesn't matter what time, just want him on the grid." Would I? Boy, I'd love to. I jumped at the chance. My mechanics and my guys were not so sure, because they thought it would take away time from my practice. No, I said, "No problem, do that. Bike's probably the same as mine," and off I went. So exactly that's what happened. It was 12 o'clock and the track opened up, and off I went out there, wearing the dark visor, of course, the number 7 helmet and everything else, and away I went. But what I couldn't believe is every time I got around the hairpin where the big crowds were, there was all these girls screaming at me and waving their underwear at me and everything else like that. Little did they know, underneath the helmet was this bloke with a big nose and big ears, was bombing around there pretending to be Barry Sheene. So I did something like 3 or 4 laps, came in straight into the awning, parked the bike up, and at that point a lot of the journalists had come running up. What's up? Well, can we interview Barry? And the mechanic said I wouldn't go anywhere near him. He's furious, so the disc valve's broken, so I'd leave him alone. I'm creeping out the back into my tent, putting my helmet and leathers on, my bike's all running, and everyone's wondering, why is Parrish late out for practice? Off I went, and I did probably 20 laps, sorted out the jetting and the gearing, and we got the bike tuned up really well, and I felt pretty comfortable with the bike. Went off, had a cup of tea. Barry comes back and gets out, and luckily his leg's all fixed up. "Stavros, well done, thanks for that. How did we go?" I said, "I don't know, I haven't even been to look at the times," because back then you had to go and look on the toilet wall where the old lady would have written out all the times, and we wandered over there, and there it was in black and white. Front row, number 7, Barry Sheene. 3rd row, number 6, Steve Parrish.
You out-qualified yourself.
I out-qualified myself, and to this day I don't know whether his bike was better, the underwear being waved at me, or just me wearing the number 7 did it. So yeah, I out-qualified. And he said, well, I can't even say on here what he called me, but he called me, he couldn't believe what had gone on. So anyway, he did win the race, and I think I finished up 2nd or 3rd or anything else, something like that.
You touched on a story before about finishing, or an incident at the British Grand Prix, I think it was. Share with our audience. It involves a pit board. There would have been chalkboards back then where you wrote messages and things. Baz had a mechanical. He's out of the race. You're leading. Tell us where you were and what happened.
Well, that was at Silverstone, actually, at the British Grand Prix, and this is the end of '77, and I was really looking forward to Silverstone, because it would have been the only track that I knew of that year, and Barry was desperate to win. He'd won the championship already, but desperate to win the British Grand Prix. And no Briton has won the British Grand Prix to this day, apart from when it was at the TT, of course, but when it had moved back to the mainland, which was '77, and I'm really looking forward to this. My bike was running like a dream. I had a great mechanic and everything else, but Barry had the later model bike than me, which was arguably a little bit better, I guess you'd say, but it was slightly less reliable, and he'd had all sorts of problems during practice, and he'd actually borrowed my old bike to go out and qualify, and I can't remember if he was first, but we were all on the front row. There would have been back then at Silverstone maybe 8 on the front row, and it was myself, Barry, Chicotto, Kenny Roberts, I think, no, it wouldn't have been Kenny that year, Will Hartog, John Williams, British rider. Race starts, push start, I get a reasonably good start, and I'm having a bit of a go with Barry, and we're having a bit of a giggle and stuff like that. Will Hartog, Chicotto, Pat Hennon was also in the mix and everything else. And about lap 11, half race distance, 22 lap race, and this is on the real fast Silverstone circuit before they slowed it all down. I saw his hand go up, he was in front of me, and he goes straight down pit lane. That was his race out. I carry on, and by about lap 18, I'm in front, and I've got past Chicotto, and I've got past Pat Hennon, I've got past John Williams and Hartog and this and the other, and I'm leading the British Grand Prix, and I'm starting to smirk a little bit, and all the crowd are waving, because they've got no Barry Sheene to wave for, so I was the next guy along. Anyway, my pit board comes out, and it was a chalk board back then. There was none of these big fancy boards, and I had a mechanic, big tall fella called Martin Brookman. Lap 3 plus 1, meaning 3 laps to go, 1 second in front. And back then you dared look behind in case you slowed your bike down. But I had a quick peek, and yes, I'd got the lead, and I'd got a second. Lap 2, plus +2, so I'm now 2 seconds. So I'm gaining a second a lap and everything else. Really kind of, this is going good. And the bike was running so sweet, and I'm talking to it. Come on, you old girl, you can do it. 2 laps to go, and I came around to start the last lap, expecting to see, obviously, P1 +4 or something like that. And I had a quick glance, and sure enough, I had got a reasonable lead. Woodcote Corner at Silverstone was 5th gear on a Suzuki RG 500, maybe 140 mile an hour, scary corner. So you had to, once you got around the corner, you had a quick glance up to see what was going on. I glanced up, looking towards 2.5 miles to finish and win the British Grand Prix, and there was my pit board hanging out, Sheene holding it out, and it said nothing else but "gas it, wanker." Sorry about the swearing, but that is exactly what it said. And I had to, I stupidly, that I clearly wasn't focusing. I'm starting to giggle now. And it had started drizzling with rain. There was a few spots of rain, but I'm not sure if they made much difference. But anyways, a few spots of rain. So I knew I'd got a lead, and I braked fairly early, touched the front brake on the old RG 500 that I was praising. And the front just folded, and I slid straight down the track underneath a straw bale. And that was it. And I thought I was in a dream, when you... Because it had gone all dark, I thought I'd perhaps died, but I got a bale on my head. And I just could not believe it. I was sliding down the track thinking, no, I'm going to wake up any minute now, but unfortunately it wasn't. John Williams inherited the lead and went to the next corner, and he crashed out, so I think the rain had affected a little bit. Pat Hennon, the worst person in the world to win it, because he's kind of our teammate, goes on to win the flipping race and ends up 3rd in the championship, and I'm bumped down to 5th. And so I can only assume Barry Sheene was telepathic, because he knew I was what he put out on the pit board. Crashing. So I was so near to win the British Grand Prix, and I could have been famous, Rusty. It never happened.
You two were cheeky. We mentioned before that it was during a great period of change for the sport, and Baz was big on making sure facilities and things were right for riders, right for team people. What happened at Imatra? You went to Imatra, I think, didn't you? And Baz was a bit miffed about the state of the facilities, and he had asked before for things to be improved.
Yeah, we were going through this period, I think, and Barry, because he had so much horsepower, when I say not in his bike, but him himself, he was respected by everyone.
Just clear up where Imatra is.
Imatra is right on the border of Russia, actually, top of Finland. And again, you've got to remember, which is so uncommon back then, we would all travel around. It was called the Continental Circus, that's what it was. It'd be a bunch of guys with caravans and transit vans, and you'd drive up, and we would have gone from the Swedish Grand Prix Anderstorp to get the ferry over to Finland, and it would be an overnight ferry, and everyone would get drunk, and it'd be in a disco. And I must just tell you a very quick story about this, because riding for Suzuki's, we had a bit more money, and we could have cabins, and they had this kind of corridor with all these cabins. And I remember Rex White had one, I had one, Barry and Steph had one, and Pat Hennon would have had one, and the Kawasaki team and stuff like that. And I got up early in the morning, and I roped everyone's doors together so they couldn't get out of their cabins. So this tannoy comes up, everyone please go to your vehicles, please go to your vehicles. No one could get out there, so no one could get off the ferry, which I thought was hilarious. Anyway, so we'll move on. So we get to Finland, and again, I didn't have a clue that the facilities weren't that bad. It had a really scabby toilet block with probably 4 cubicles in it in the running track area, because there was no paddocks there, because it was a road circuit. A lot of the circuits we were racing at were road circuits, so you didn't have a paddock or toilet blocks or anything else. The toilets we had were designed for the athletics track, is where we'd park all our vans and caravans. And right beside the athletics track was a great big lake, as Finland has got lots of trees and lots of lakes. And so we would get up there on the Monday night after getting off the ferry and go swimming and mucking around as you would, and looking at all the pretty Finnish girls that are around and things like that. But there wasn't a lot to do. But when you went in the lake there, it was one of these conservation lakes where they made you wear caps, and if you weren't wearing a cap, they'd come around and give you one and tell you off. There was no motorboats or outboards, so you had to use rowing boats or canoes and things like that. But the water was crystal clear. You could see the bottom at 3 meters and things like that. So, and the girls loved it. They would got their bikinis on, and we were having fun, and we'd get all our washing done, because you've got 4 or 5 days. We're like living like gypsies, I guess you could say, but having a lot of fun. Anyway, race took place, scary race, tree-lined over railway crossings and everything else, and Barry still had a problem with his bike, and he ended up dropping back from leading it to finish 5th. I finished 4th. So room for celebration, because his 5th position gave him the 1977 World Championship, locked out with 2 rounds to go. So it's going to be a big party that night, and I finished 4th, so I was pretty happy with that. Moved me up in the championship. So we were getting everything packed up, and there was so many people in the paddocks back then, not like it is now, because we had 125cc class, 250cc, 350, 500 sidecars, and the grids back then would probably be 50 people, 45, 50 people. So there's 500 people living in a little kind of campsite with a toilet block with 3 cubicles and maybe 2 for the girls or something, like all made of wood, because everything in Finland's made of wood. 5 o'clock, everyone's packing up, and we're all getting ready to go to the Valtian Hotel, which was the place to be at, where they would have a presentation. Barry comes wandering over to me, and I'm sat there helping the guys pack up my tent, and everyone was folding tents and awnings and things like that. And he said, Stavros, he said, I've been coming here for about 4 years now. It's disgusting. We love the place, but the toilet block needs getting rid of. He said, if you're coming to help me, I'm going to set fire to it. You know what? He said, we'll set fire to it. I'll look around. There's no one around. Everyone's packing up and stuff like that. I said, Parrish, if Barry Sheene said we're going to set fire to the toilet block, that's what we're going to do. He said, Stavros, bring that 20 litres of avgas that you got left. He says, this one's got probably 18 litres in. Bring that. He says, we'll go and tip it in there and get rid of it. All right then. So I said, we wander across, and about 25 metres from where we get there, he stops, looks around. He said, there's no one watching. He said, I'll keep guard. You go and tip the avgas. Oh, thanks, mate. So anyway, if Barry Sheene wants me to go and tip pets around there, so that's what I did. I went in there and I'm shouting, anyone in, anyone in? No, it was empty. Got this 18 litres of fuel, which was high octane avgas, tipped it all around there, left a trail. He said, leave a trail back to where I am now, and he's now stood behind a tree. He said, if there's no one looking, I'll just set fire to it. It'll be gone. It'll be as easy as you can believe. Right, so I did exactly that, get back there. He's got his fag on, his gauze on, or whatever, with the tip broken off that he used to smoke, Gitan with the tip broken off, with his lighter, his gold lighter in his pocket. We look around, no one there. Lights the touch paper as such, which was a stream of petrol. And at this point, I wish I'd gone to the science lessons that I should have gone to before I got expelled. None of us knew what methane gas was. I have never seen anything like it. The whole shithouse blew to bits. The walls come off, and the roof flies over the top of the paddock and lands upside down in this lake that you had to wear a cap to go swimming in, that was crystal clear. The shithouse roof, it was like a movie. It was burning upside down.
In the conservation lake?
Yeah, in the lake that you had to wear a cap to go swimming. At this point, there is security running. I think they actually thought that the toilets had self-combusted with all the stink and the smell from the toilet, but they had a bit of help with 18 litres of gas. So we've crept off. No one really had any idea. Security are standing around looking and stuff like that. Where it went horribly wrong was the fact that as the shithouse roof proceeded to go over the top of the paddock, all the guys, and I remember Jon Eckerold, Alan North, Corky Ballanton, were in the process of folding their tents up with covered in shit. It was all sprayed on top of them. So that went down like a fart.
So this is on cars and on everything?
Oh, everything was covered in poo. Anyway, so we kind of got in a bit of a bollocking for that from the riders and everything else. And to top the story off, just last year, 2018, I am at the the TT, Classic TT, working for Greenlight Television, covering the race. I'm at Jerby Airfield, which is a little airfield in the middle of the Isle of Man, which they use for testing, and they have a kind of a day where a lot of the classic bikes come along, waiting to do some filming. Stood at the cafe, and this little lady comes up and taps me on the shoulders in a Swedish accent. She said, Mr. Parrish. I said, yes, thinking it was like, I don't know, it could have been my daughter or whatever, I don't know. Or mother of my daughter, who knows. I said, yes. She said, I was in Finland with my husband, Esso, and we were at Finland, and we were parking, and this was her exact words, we were parking next to the old shithouse, she said. And she said, and when it caught fire and blew up, we saw everything that was going on, and the police were coming to us, and they said, who did this? And my husband, Esso, he said, we didn't see. And we did, of course. We saw everything that was going on, but he wouldn't tell the police, so they took him away, and he went to prison. Poor old Esso, whoever he was, refused to grass us up and spent a night in prison. So anyway, just top the story off, because I'd never had anyone else that witnessed it apart from the people that got sprayed in it. No, it was lovely.
I love it.
Anyway, just to say, we did get a new toilet block the next year, brand new toilet block. So I feel part of history, changing the world of toilet blocks around the world.
because you were gypsies and you had, you know, transit vans and camper vans and things like that, I would imagine there's some good stories. And one that's in the back of my mind, it may not have been you or Baz, I reckon there's a story of legend of someone taking their old Transit, which had a huge amount of Ks on it, and maybe, quote-unquote, borrowing one from a rental car company and parking it in a garage and doing the late night where the body of one ended up with the brand new engine. Are they true, those sort of old yards?
Yeah, but I think almost certainly. Well, I did it with rear axles. Transit vans, yeah. Transit vans were renowned for rear axles whining and making horrible noise. They had like this horrible V4 engine in them, but the rear axles only lasted probably half a season, something like that. So yeah, exactly that. Go and rent one for the weekend for 45, 50 quid or something like that, bring it back up on the jacks, take the axle out, stick the other one back on, probably take the better tyres and everything else you could, and then fire it all back. That was pretty common. And then there was so many stories. The travelling part was probably as much fun as anything that you could ever imagine, because we were this convoy of people. But it was... so many scams went on because you had to have carnets to go through from France to Belgium and Belgium to Germany and Germany to Switzerland, and it was just hard work. So you always had to have a load of bribes to give people caps and hats and stuff like that. And the Italians in particular were horrible because they wouldn't let you through unless you gave them a T-shirt. Because I always used to put all my T-shirts ready to give them, but I used to put itching powder in them all. Sod them. If they were nicking T-shirts off me, I used to make sure they were as uncomfortable as they possibly could. And then the ferries, because obviously living in England, we had to get a ferry every time we went anywhere. But you couldn't afford it because you had a transit van with a caravan on the back, and you'd have your mechanic and girlfriend, and there could be 4 or 5 of you, and the cost of the ticket would be £200, which was probably as much as you'd get start money or to go to the Grand Prix. So I had, and I think a lot of people learned from me, I had this scam, because back in those days you had this carbon paper that you'd go to a travel agent and they'd write in what you got, and it'd be transit van, caravan, this. So I'd just turn up there and I'd put minivan down or something like that, and it'd be I don't know, 3 metres for instance, and that was it, and one person. So straight away you get your own, and I had all these different coloured carbon papers, blue carbon paper, red carbon paper, and I'd look at the pen she was using when you went to the travel agent, and usually when they turned around I'd nick the pens. So I'd got everything, I'd got the equipment, go home, and the minivan, instead of being 3 metres, you could make a 3 into an 8 by putting another 3 beside it. Then you'd put +4 at the end for people instead of 1, so you could make the 1 into a 4, and then you just write plus caravan on the back of that, and it used to kind of work. And you get there and you give it to this guy who didn't really give a shit at the ferry, and you get on there nice and early, and then we go upstairs and watch all these people trying to get on, and invariably me and 2 or 3 others had done exactly the same, and there would be 3 or 4 people left on the dock because they couldn't get on, and the bloke would be walking around trying to work out what's gone wrong, because they used to work out the meterage, and of course we'd added 3 metres and a caravan, and these poor people trying to go on holiday never got on the ferries. And then on top of that there was a lounge. If you were a lorry driver you could get in for free food, part of your ticket was. So I'd always have a Scania or an ERF or a Foden jacket, which were trucks in the UK that they'd wear, and look a bit greasy, and just say, I left my ticket in the thing, I'm a lorry driver, and we get a free meal as well. That was the way it was done.
Macau has always been, 2 and 4 wheel, a place of a legendary race meeting. Are you allowed back into Macau? And if not, why not?
Well, you are right. I wasn't allowed in, but back when I got banned from Macau, which was very, very embarrassing, it was owned by the Portuguese, but it was a lease that they had, and it went like Hong Kong back to the Chinese. So I have now been back since, but I had a 10-year ban actually, which is, I felt quite proud. Not many people are banned from a country, are they? You might be banned from hire car companies like we all are, but not a country. And that was just, I was a victim of circumstances, I guess you would say, because we decided in 84 that it would be really good fun at the end of the race meeting to let off a firework, because that's in Macau is where they make all the fireworks for Chinese New Year, and you can go to a factory around the back of Macau and buy a firework which is the size of a 45-gallon drum, round and half as deep, for £2 or something like that. Yeah, and we got these things, and we're having a bit of fun letting them off around on the beach and this, that and the other. So on the Sunday night after the race, we'd all survived it, so there was a reason to celebrate. we knew that one or two of these lower class people might be going to have a massage. Apparently that's what goes on in these places with a red light over the door, where they've got all these girls lined up with numbers on. Allegedly that's what goes on. So it was all decided, a little splinter group, and myself and a guy called Paul Butler, who was the commercial manager for Kenny Roberts' team, was out in Macau to try and negotiate a deal with Lucky Strike cigarettes when it was all cigarette sponsorship. And we were locked in a team together because Lucky Strike had sponsored my bikes, and my bike's painted up in that, and it was a kind of toe in the water for them before they spent lots of money on Kenny Roberts' team. So Paul and I were hanging around together. A guy called Howard Lees, who was quite a good endurance racer, sadly he got killed in a plane crash, and an Irish fella. And anyway, we hatched this plan that at 9 o'clock we were going to go down to the brothel and let one of these fireworks off and see what sort of commotion it made. And I think we got a heavy-duty one that went off bigger and better than I thought. And no question about it, the blue touch paper was shorter than it had been on the one we'd experimented with. I'm driving a Mini Moke, which was our kind of getaway vehicle, and it was all worked out, military operation. I'd be driving a getaway vehicle, Paul Butler would like it, Howard Lees would roll it through the door, and the Irish fellow would be kind of guard to watch what was going on. So that was the deal. I left it running outside, ready to go and stuff like that. We went, Howard Lees, Paul lit it with his cigar, we went to roll it through, and the thing went off before it even got through the door, and it was flying around everywhere like a massive rip-rap thing that was bouncing around everywhere, and blue paper was flying here, and there was smoke going on and screaming from every direction. The poor girls behind the glass thing was screaming, thinking that they'd been under attack. Can you imagine doing it these days? You'd definitely get handcuffed and locked up. So anyway, it goes off, but the funny part was, as it went off, we were all starting to laugh so much. Instead of getting away, we're standing watching what was going on, and the smoke slowly cleared as it all died down. All these naked people coming running out the back, and it was just like a carry-on film. It was like you could see them thinking, you know, it's never happened to me like this before, because all these people had all this banging and crashing and stuff like that. But where it went very, very wrong was sat at the bar watching everything that went on. The chief of Macau's police was waiting for him with a car outside, because the chief of police was round the back, probably getting a backhander or a front-hander or something like that. I don't know what he was up to, but he shouldn't have been there. So the driver who was waiting for him decides he'd better find out what's been going on. So he then comes out, sees us getting in a Mini Moke, gets in a car, follows us back, finds out where we're staying, which was the Hilton Hotel, I think, in Kowloon, somewhere in Macau, or over a bridge. So then we've been there and we're having a drink and we're celebrating our successful mission of shutting down the brothel that night. And then all the police turned up because they knew where we were and came straight in, and there was all sorts of commotion. They wanted our passports from us, details and everything else, and they made us give us our passports. Luckily in those days I carried a second passport around that had my American visa on it, and so I gave them that one, keeping my good one, but the other idiots gave their proper passports. And they said, we'll be back in the morning to sort this out, there's some paperwork to be done and everything else. They turned up at 9 o'clock in the morning, and the whole kind of crew of people from the UK and around that a guy called Mike Trimby was organising were due to leave at 10 o'clock. We're in the foyer, police all turn up with handcuffs. And they're looking for me, Paul Butler, Howard Lees and everything else. And we couldn't leave because they had our passports, or they couldn't leave, but I actually had given my false passport. As soon as I saw him come in the door, I have gone up to floor 1 in the lift, borrowing a newspaper and a cap off of my mechanic. At floor 1, there was a set of ladders that you could jump out and go down to get out. And I did that. I pulled the ladder, shot down, ran around the hotel, jumped in a cab, went straight to the hydrofoil, got on the first hydrofoil, go back to Hong Kong.
You're out of there.
Out of it. I was clean out of it, thinking I'm not getting involved with this. I'd just got married, so I didn't want to get trapped in Macau. And off I go. Anyway, there was no mobiles or phones there, so I'm sat in Hong Kong where the jet foil lands, knowing that the others are due back, with my gin and tonic, thinking I'm pretty flash because I've escaped as such. When I get the other lot arrive, and Mike Trimby was absolutely furious at what had gone on and told me unless I went back to Macau, they were impounding all the motorbikes, and there was probably 50 of them, all the Formula 3 cars, and we're talking of, this Formula 3 was a top-end event. They'd got Damon Hill racing there and Michael Schumacher, and they'd locked everything in until I returned. So I had no choice. I have to get on the bloody hydrofoil, go back to Macau. And when I get back there, they'd use the picture out of my passport, and there's this big sign up, like a cowboy thing, wanted. Yeah, wanted. Do not let this bloke out. Little did they know I'd already gone. So I go back there, and I'm arrested. And the flipping, as soon as I get off the ferry, the hydrofoil, I'm arrested, taken down there, and I'm in prison, and there's all this paperwork. And it was horrendous. We had to get the British consulate involved and everything else, because it was messy, very messy. Paul Butler was crapping himself because he was due to have a meeting with Lucky Strike in Macau on Monday morning. Couldn't tell him he was in prison for blowing a brothel up, could he? Anyway, finally, 4.5 days, 5 days, we're let out. But it wasn't good for my marriage. It wasn't a good start to my marriage, I can tell you.
Let's wrap up the motorcycle chapter for a second here before we go on to your truck racing, which is phenomenal. Has there been over time a bike that you've got a really soft spot for, a racing bike, and why? Which one and why?
It has to be the RG 500 Suzuki. Right the way through, as soon as I got on the thing, I fell in love with it, and it's been good to me. And that's why I'm loving the classic stuff, because Stuart von Ton Dermot, he'd bring a bike along for me to race. There's a guy called Steve Wheatman that has a bike that's very similar to what I used to race, and he kindly lets me use it. I've been in, as I said at the beginning, in South Africa riding that, and I've got 3 of them of my own, and I've got 2 that I used to race, and they sit in my gym at home, and it gets me going in the gym just to look at them. So it's good for my fitness. So they are the bike that has I have an affinity with, and I love them to bits. They're just rather special. They were the ultimate machine back in the day. So yeah, the RG 500 is unquestionably my motorcycle.
So you go I may not have the timeline right here in your career, but you go off and you would do truck racing, and British champion, European champion, multi-time world champion of truck racing. That is the polar opposite of 500cc Grand Prix racing. How did that opportunity come about, and what was it like going from 2-wheel to 4-wheel like that?
Well, we come back to my old mate, Mr. Sheene. He pretty much everything. He triggered everything that I did, and you're right. It's polar opposite in weight. And I'll come to it in a minute, but yeah, what happened was Barry Sheene, a lot of his fans will know that on his bike in '84 he had DAF. DAF Trucks was a sponsor of his. So in '85, truck racing ended up coming to the UK, the multi-part truck Grand Prix, and it was actually put together and organised and promoted by our agents, a company called CSS, and they were Barry's agents for any jobs and work he did. So immediately it all worked really well. They wanted Barry Sheene driving in it. DAF wanted Barry Sheene to drive a DAF truck, and I wanted to drive in it. And during the years of us racing together on bikes, Barry and I'm talking about, a number of times you'd get invited into a celebrity car race, and they'd have at Brandsat Ford Fiestas or something, and at Donington Park they'd have Vauxhall whatever's, I don't know, and we'd get the chance to have a race in these cars. And if Barry was sat here beside me now, he'd agree with me. I was faster than him in a car, but he was faster than me on a motorbike. So with him driving a truck, I thought, shit, I need to go at this. So I literally drove round to Mercedes-Benz UK, got to see the PR guy, and I said, look, Barry Sheene is driving a DAF truck at the British multi-part, whatever they called it, at Donington Park in a DAF truck. Have you got, and these were all road trucks at this point, have you got a Mercedes that I could drive? Are you interested in doing it? And they were, well, we're not that bothered, but we actually have a dealer that does trucks that would let you have a truck. So they put me in touch. The dealer said, yeah, we are interested. We'll bring one along and get you to have a right drive in it and see if you think it's any good and stuff like that. And I've lied and said I've got an HGV, like a heavy good vehicle licence. I'd never been bigger than a Transit in my life. So they bring this truck along and I get in it, and I'm up there, like they were big high seat and stuff like that, and it's about 18 gears and double clutches, and I'm grinding all the gears, and I said, I'm actually more used to a Foden or something like that. Ken, just bullshitting. Anyway, they let me drive this truck. We get to Donington, and as I say, it was ridiculously dangerous because these trucks had no roll cages. The brakes lasted about 2 laps. They had a lap strap, no 4-point harnesses and everything else. And my very first lap at Donington in practice was driving out the pits, down through Craner curves at Donington Park. And as I went to brake for the old hairpin, they had these seats that flew up and down, and it hit a bump, the seat went up in the air, and I couldn't reach the brake lever and went straight off the track. So I had to drive back on the track. We come round the pits and they get a load of tie-downs and tie the seat down so I can at least get my foot on the brake. Anyway, it went on like that, and sure enough, my poor old truck had no brakes, but I finished second in the race. Barry finished about fifth, I think. And bam, wham, bam, I'm a truck racer all of a sudden. Going back to what you were saying about being polar opposite, funnily enough, there is unquestionably some connection between bikes and trucks, because you ride a motorcycle on the road, on a track, you don't go to the corner and go bam into the corner. It's not erratic like a car. You drive a car with a lot of grip and you kind of late apex, turn it in sharp using kind of G forces and side forces. With a motorcycle, you peel in, you coax it, you go in early because it hasn't got a lot of grip and you have to do everything really smoothly. And that's exactly what it was like in a 4.5 ton truck. You could not be erratic. And I think my background of bike racing stood me in good stead, and all the way through, a lot of people had come from car racing. In the race at Donington, that first race, Martin Brundle was driving a Renault truck. I believe Stig Blomqvist was there. A number of people from the car world, rally world and stuff like that were there. And they didn't really kind of get it. They really were too erratic and stuff like that. So all of a sudden, there I am, starting to do really well in truck racing. And what my real love was, not only the speed and the smoke and the smell and the camaraderie, was the fact that I didn't keep waking up in hospital.
The machines are amazing, mate. I mean, I think I can recall when I first started in commentary and things like that, the 0 to 60 kilometre an hour. I mean, it's phenomenal, isn't it?
Oh wow! To put it in perspective, I knew they were fast, and we did some TV stuff like filming them and stuff like that. One of the issues was that they didn't have a lot of grip, but we'd test a lot at Hockenheim, which was owned by Mercedes-Benz at the time, and I'd go along there and we'd have the track to use, and it'd be the DTM cars were the regular people that would go and test there, the German touring cars, and I know, you know those things. They were the hottest saloon car. They were space frame things with 500 horsepower, big V8s, and they'd have Audi would be involved, and Mercedes-Benz, and all those guys would be involved. And they would clearly lap faster than us in the truck, but we'd come out of the final corner on the start and finish at Hockenheim.
Together? You're on the track?
Yeah, together. And I would just leave them for dead. I'd blast away, and there'd be Bernd Schneider looking up thinking, what the hell is going on here? It was absurd, really, that they had so much torque. Anybody that knows anything about torque, if you go and buy a Porsche or whatever you might buy, a big thing, they might have 600 Newton meters of torque. We had 6,000 Newton meters of torque in these trucks. They would blast away like you couldn't believe, and it was just fun to drive because it was like driving, I guess, an old-time car, because they didn't have a great deal of grip or suspension, but they had so much power, so you'd be just powering out of corners, sliding them and burning smoke and things like that. And they were fun things to drive, and eventually Alan Jones had a go at doing it, Stig Blomqvist, a famous rally driver, and there was all these famous people coming in to drive trucks, and even David Coulthard had a go in them, and Bernd Schneider and people like that would have a go in them and come out just with the biggest smile on their face you could imagine.
There's an amazing chapter for you, because I mean, some races in Europe, the crowds then you would dream of now for Formula One, more than 100,000 people, and you would be invited every year to the end of season Mercedes gala, as you know, with their Formula One drivers or DTM drivers, as one of the big things, mate.
Yeah, it's called Stars and Cars, was the big event at the end of the season, and they would have a test track around the Mercedes-Benz factory in Stuttgart, and we'd have to go along and drive around there and the Formula One cars and bits and pieces and stuff like that. So truck racing for Mercedes for a number of years, about 91 to 2001 was the 10-year period. The budget was similar to DTM's.
What sort of number?
Oh, millions. Yeah. The truck I drove probably you'd value it onto £1 million. It was so trick, it really was. And the engine, the development in diesel engines was very integral to that time. And going back, if you think anybody listening to this, if you are old enough, back then, why would you drive a diesel car back in the sort of late 80s? Because they stunk and they smelt and they didn't go very fast and they made a lot of noise. But if you think about the transition from that era to now modern day diesels, I think it was a period when you had to have a diesel to win Le Mans. You know, they got faster than the petrols. So that period was a great part of the development for Mercedes-Benz to to develop the engine and the brakes and all the things that went on with that truck racing. It was kind of weird because you would think that trucks shouldn't have that kind of development, but it was very important. If you want to pull a big load, you need a lot of torque. So anyway, it was all part of it. So we'd go to the Stars and Cars at the end of the year. Crowds had come along to watch, and they'd like the DTM cars, and they'd like the Formula One cars, but they had never seen anything like a big truck doing 100 miles an hour sideways with smoke off the back and everything else. And if you go to the museum at Stuttgart now, my truck is sat in there with the Formula One cars, with me, my overalls and helmet and things like that. So I'm very proud of that period.
In the time I say this sentence, a superbike has gone from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour and come to a complete stop again. What have you been doing in that time?
Let's talk about a couple of the things that were in and are in the Parrish garage. You talked about having some of your bikes before. How many have you kept over time? You said 3 there, I think, at one point in the conversation.
Yeah, I did have an awful lot of them. When I say an awful lot, I probably had about a dozen, 12 of them, from 250cc Yamahas, 350s and 500s and things like that. 750 Yamahas, but unfortunately, divorce turned up, probably through Macau, actually. I split up with my wife, and I felt it appropriate to kind of not give half of them to her. I wish I had, actually, to this day, because they're now worth 4 times as much as I sold them for, and I'm now buying them back. So I used to have quite a collection of bikes, but I've ended up getting a few of them back, and as I say, I'm paying a lot more for them when I sold them. I've got 2 of my old RG 500s, one that used to be raced by a mate of mine. I have an FZ 750 Yamaha, which was my last ever race bike in '86, and I have an old Honda that was raced, but I never raced it, but I wanted it for a collection. So I'm gradually building my collection back up. I have an old Panther sidecar outfit, just so I can scare the hell out of my wife when I take her out and things like that. And all sorts of stupid kind of vehicles, a fire engine and a hearse and an armoured car, and weird things like that.
Let's break out on a couple of those. The hearse has, correct me if I'm wrong, you have a coffin in the back and a prosthetic arm. What hearse is it? Tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah, I know it sounds ridiculous. This is my second hearse, actually. I wanted a faster one than the first one. So I bought one with a Jag engine in it and everything else, and all the bits and pieces. In fact, I had a period, believe it or not, where I was sponsored by an undertaker because he had lots of money and he sponsored me. So he's my hearse dealer. Because it's quite awkward to go and buy a hearse. They always are. But the first one I bought, I went to this undertaker's and they said, "You are in the business, aren't you?" And I'm wearing a black suit and everything. Yes, of course I am. Took it out there and got it down the road and was doing 100 miles an hour. Anyway, so the one I've got now is, it's just a bit of a giggle, really. If you go somewhere in a hearse, for a start, Christmas time in Cambridge, near where I live, you can't get parking anywhere. I take this down the pedestrian area and leave the back door open and just leave it there and never get a parking ticket. So it's really good for that. And it just causes a bit of a scene. I used it, bless her, my daughter, her 21st birthday party was at this kind of smart joint in Cambridge, and I took the hearse, much to her disgust and everything else, and all her mates turned up and thought it was a funeral and went home. So saved me a bit of money on drink, I think. Anyway, sometimes if I'm a bit down, I get the hearse out and give it a run down the road, and most people respect hearse, and I back the traffic down, particularly about 8 o'clock on a Monday morning, everyone late for work, and back them down to about 25 miles an hour, and I can get 10 or 15 cars behind me, and you can see them all going, "Oh, for Christ's sake, I'm late for work already, and should I overtake it? No, I better not." And then I'll give them about 3 or 4 miles, and then I just floor it and just skid it sideways through all these S-bends. I've got a set of S-bends that I know how fast I can get through them, having had the diff locked up on the hearse, and the old Jag engine flat out through there, and I get it sliding through the corners, and I leave the pin out where the box should be, and the old box slides from right to left with the arm hanging out, and I put quite a nice watch on the arm as well. So, and I go around and roundabout sideways and skid around there, and there's all these people with their eyes wide open, their mouth open, they can't believe what's going on. They must get to work and go, "You're not going to believe what I've seen today." And I've actually shouldn't have it, but I've got a police siren on it as well, so you don't often see a hearse going, "Nee."
You have, our good friend is Lee Diffie. He tells me you have a police cap that you keep on the parcel shelf of, is it a Merc that you've got? What is it? And that sometimes, if anyone's a bit out of line when you're on the highway or whatever, that gets them back into line pretty prompt, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does really. I don't know if I could get done for... I don't know if I should get done for impersonating a police officer, because I actually bought the policeman's hat from a stripper. That was all she was wearing. So I ended up buying it off her. But yeah, I do. I keep it in most of the cars because it's real. What makes me giggle, and I shouldn't say it's just women, but women are good at sitting at the lights on the phone, aren't they? You know, they're always trying to sneak it in and this and the other. So I just pull up beside them, slip my hat on and stare across at them, and they throw the phone on the floor, and I can see them going, can't talk, there's a policeman looking at me and stuff like that. But yeah, if someone start cutting me up or anything, I just go past and put my cap on them, point to them, and I've had people pull over actually. That's quite funny, and actually pull in a lay-by, and I just piss off them. So the police hat, just one of them flat checkered caps and things like that, and we have a lot of fun with that, just winding people up.
They are your good deeds. Let's just bounce through the cars in the Parrish garage. You mentioned the hearse. What's your daily drive?
Range Rover now. Yeah, I have a Range Rover Sport, one of them big engine ones I use because I need something to tow a trailer, and I live on a farm, so weather in England, it gets a bit stuff like that. C63 Mercedes, that makes a nice noise. And my wife drives a little Mercedes. And what else have I got? That's it. A few road motorbikes. I have a big Indian Roadmaster, which has got heated seats and heated grips, stereo, sat nav, and things like that. And you would never expect me to ride something like that, but I love it because it's comfortable. I have a lovely Triumph Bonneville, one of the new Triumph Bonnevilles. I use that, and I keep that actually in Mallorca, where we have a holiday house. And that's probably it now. If I want a track day bike, people lend me one wherever I go. And the FZ 750 I use on the track a little bit. And I guess an aeroplane parked outside.
Well, that was my next thing, because you're based in the British Midlands, and you can land and pretty much taxi up to the house, can't you? Is that right?
Yeah, I do. I live not about 10 miles west of Cambridge, and I have a good mate that had a farm that has a landing strip there, and a house came up for sale, which was part of one of his relations, and this would have been when I was living in the Isle of Man. When I got divorced, I moved to the Isle of Man, and then I thought, did about 10 years, and I thought, I'm going to come back to the UK. Had an aeroplane that I used to fly backwards and forwards to the Isle of Man. I thought, how perfect would it be to get a house where you can park it outside the door? And this house came up for sale. I bought it. It's known as Top Farm, Hook's Corner, but people call it Hooker's Corner. That's the name of the house. And I seriously can park it within 15 metres of my back door, and it's lovely because it's sort of, I can't afford to run a helicopter. Well, I could, but I think they're way too expensive. But having your plane parked at your house is kind of half a helicopter. And I have an IMC licence, so I can fly in bad weather, and instrument rated and stuff like that. So I use it an awful lot.
You call it, tell us what you call it. It's Plummet Airways.
Yeah, it's known as Plummet Airways, and that deters too many people wanting lifts, really, because they don't want to get in it. But on occasions, actually, for a number of years, whilst working with BBC, Susie Perry, Lee Diffie, Charlie Cox, Matt Roberts, they would all hitch a lift in Plummet Airways, and we'd hurtle off to Assen in Holland or Le Mans in France or something like that. And it was so nice. They'd just turn up at mine, we'd have a cup of tea, and then off we'd go with Plummet Airways. And for Le Mans, for instance, the Grand Prix would generally be held at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, probably finished around 3 o'clock. We'd do some interviews. We'd nip across to the airfield, which was 15-minute walk across the airfield, jump in Plummet, back home. We'd be lit up the barbecue 5 o'clock in the afternoon, because we gain an hour. We'd be having a barbecue and a beer back at my house. I mean, how perfect was that?
Fantastic. Diff says that there would be a point in the trip, you're very very professional with the way that you fly, but there's a point in the trip where you get on the intercom and you say that the lunch cart's coming through now.
Yeah, my wife would, or my girlfriend at the time, she'd prepare little meal packs and stuff like that, and in the pack would be a can of gin and tonic and stuff like that
for the guests.
And sometimes we'd just celebrate that we'd actually made it home. But yeah, the food trolley had come out, which would be passed out over the top and things like that. Actually, with Diff, I think he only ever got to eat normal food, but I remember after he'd left to gone to better things, I can distinctly remember Matt Roberts and I think it was Charlie Cox. We decided to have a bit of a laugh with them, and my wife at the time, or my girlfriend actually, it would have been before I got married, we'd set up this little thing. We spent days trying to do this little food pack and everything else, and we'd got these mealworms and we dipped them in chocolate. Like you'd normally feed insects with them or something like that, and we put them in little packets and nice stuff like that. We'd have little chocolates, like Frere Roche chocolates, and in the middle of them they would have liver dog biscuits and things like that. And incredibly, they loved them. They all arrived in Le Mans one year and they'd eaten all this stuff, and when I showed them what they'd been eating, they were all sick that day and went to bed early.
What is the plane? I don't know if in this conversation we've established what type of plane it is, have we?
It's a Cessna 182, which is sort of the Land Rover of the sky, 4-seater single engine, quite a powerful plane. It'd go in and out of anywhere, and that's what we'd use. And when another little story that was quite funny, when I was racing trucks, I'd often give another driver a lift home, and some of the mechanics. PI, who were our data logging people, were based in Cambridge, so their head engineer would often scab a lift with me, and he was always getting drunk, this guy. His nickname was Virgil, because when he got drunk he'd walk around like Virgil from Thunderbirds. And he was sat in the back of the plane coming back from Dijon in France one Monday morning. It was quite a sunny morning, and he was in the back of the plane, and I'm next to a guy called Slim Borgard, who was my teammate, who was a bit of a Formula 1 driver in the day, and he was racing trucks for Mercedes as well. And Virgil was in the back farting and snoring and dribbling and everything else like that, really annoying me actually. So we're halfway across the English Channel, and there was a Sea Link ferry, and we're at 5,000 feet, I guess, something like that. And I put this 182 into a steep, steep dive, and we're down to about 1,000 foot when we leant over the back and shouted to him, "Get out, get out!" Can you imagine what it must be like waking up, hung over, and you're looking at a Sea Link ferry 1,000 foot above it, heading straight at it? And this poor guy, if I hadn't have stopped him, I think he would have got out. He was struggling in his seat belts and everything else. And I can assure you, he never slept 1 second the rest of that trip.
I'll bet. The Isle of Man is something you brought up before, and it's something that intrigues me because it's held in the highest regard by some people. I mean, you talk to Mark Webber and he thinks they are, the riders and what they do are enormously brave, enormously special. Other people are against it with a passion. You've covered it for television many, many times. How do you feel about the race?
Yeah, you're right. Mark's a big fan, and he comes across and I take him around place and he brings all his mates. He's like the tourist board, really, because he brings all these high-profile people over there, and we've had Ross Brawn come over and lots of people from Formula 1 because I think they appreciate the dangers. I really do have a love-hate relationship for the place. I love it for it's the biggest challenge in motorcycle racing. I don't care what you say, and I have so much admiration for Valentino Rossi and Mark Marquez and people like that, but when you go out there and you get the lap record like Peter Hickman did last year at 135 miles an hour in the TT, you are laying it on the line like you cannot believe. The penalty is way, way bigger than the crime, and sadly, often the penalty is your life.
People who are listening that may not know it intricately, describe the lap. I mean, you're talking about through narrow lanes by houses and all sorts of things, aren't you?
Yeah, the Isle of Man is a small island, 37, the circuit of the track is, they actually call it a course for some reason, I don't know why, but it's 37 3/4 miles around one lap. And the island sits off Liverpool, it's between Liverpool and Belfast, I guess you say, in the UK. So you're sort of north-west side of it, and that's where it sits. Anyway, the island has a population of about 80,000 people, something like that. But when the TT arrives, it doubles to 160,000 people, something like that. Anyway, 37 3/4 miles around. And you set off from the capital of Douglas, and you ride from there around through lots of places down to a place called Ballacrane, where you turn right, and then you go through a valley, and then you go up to a place called Kirkmichael, and then you go across to Ramsey, the second biggest town. Then you go up and over a mountain. 267 corners. Can you imagine trying to learn that? Not only do you have to learn the corners, you have to learn where the manhole covers are, because it's a street. It's used every day for people to go to work, take their kids to school, walk the dogs, everything you can imagine. There's manhole covers, there's gaps in the hedges where the wind blows, there's trees, there's through Kirkmichael, it's literally, there is one pavement where people walk, which would be 1/2 metre wide, and then there's houses. So, yeah, it's absurd, really, when you talk about it and think about it. And then you go out of Ramsey, over the mountain, you climb, actually not that high, 1,000 metres up over the top of a mountain where sometimes it's misty and it's wet and you're wondering what's going on, then you drop back down into Douglas. So very hard to describe, but wherever you live in the countryside, you imagine going 37 miles round through a few villages and towns and stuff like that, and that's a lap. And they do that lap now in like 16 minutes.
Crazy.
I know. You can't imagine how and why Mark Webber and a lot of high-profile people want to go and see it is because you stand on the side of the road and you think, I'm not seeing this. It's something that you would never imagine you could see. We've all stood on the pit wall here at racetracks, and the guys go whoom past you, but you stand at the bottom of Bray Hill where they come past you at 160 miles an hour and you could touch them, and they wriggle and buck and weave, and then they go up and they miss the hedge on the left-hand side by, I don't know, a couple of foot, and then they fly over the top of the hill and their bikes are in the air and they land, and then they brake and they go down a quarter bridge, and then they go through Braddon Bridge where there's walls and trees and things like that. Yeah, it's madness. If you know, truthfully, it's madness. And why I have a love-hate relationship, I have so much admiration for it. I did it. And I never won it. I finished third, but I hate it because it takes so many lives as well, and I've lost a lot of good close friends through the TT. But you can't stop those people doing it. They want to do it. No one forces them to do it. They want to take on the biggest challenge, and the exhilaration and the satisfaction you get from it when you've done it there is nothing else quite like it. You can go to any racetrack in the world, what I call a man-made track. And it's great to win. You get all the adulation, but you don't get the satisfaction you do at the TT because of that craziness of it all, and it's something very, very special.
How are sort of, you know, people from our part of the world, Aussies and Kiwis, regarded? I mean, I think to Cam Donald in more recent time and people like that, for example.
Oh, very much so, because the people from here, from Australia, from New Zealand and wherever, they go on that pilgrimage and they have to want to do it. And I think a lot of them Huey Anderson that's here this weekend, he talks about it with high esteem, and a lot of great Aussies and Kiwis have gone over there and they've won races around there, and it's part of heritage, I guess you can say. Some want to do it, some don't. I mean, I know a lot of British riders that their parents will never let them do it, and that's part of the deal. You're going to go motorcycle racing, you're not going to do the TT, and I fully understand that. Yet most Irish riders, for instance, in the Dunlop dynasty, the Joey Dunlop dynasty and the Michael Dunlop and everything else, they wouldn't consider not ever doing it. It's the biggest event of the year for them. John McGuinness, 23 times TT winner. That is the highlight of his year, and that's why he's been doing it so many years. I would go there with mixed feelings. I'd go there kind of wanted to do it, but I had a set of pace, and I reckon that pace was 80% of my capabilities, and I kept 20% in my pocket because I felt I wanted to leave an extra metre on every corner as opposed to using the last little bit and all the gravel, and I'm still here to tell the story, but a lot aren't. So you want to go and see it. I think I'd say to anyone, if you've never been to it, try and do it, because maybe one day someone will stop it. They're sucking the fun out of most things these days. So.
Yeah, they are. It's last bastion stuff, but it does so much for the place, doesn't it? I mean, it is a huge thing for them.
Yeah, sure. When I was living on the Isle of Man, where you might be somewhere, you could be in the middle of Lake Taupo. Where do you live? Isle of Man. They go TT. It's linked, intrinsically linked, and it's a great fun place. It's got its own government. It's a weird place to go. You need to go there even if you don't see the racing. The government's older than the UK government. It only gave up giving people the birch about 15 years ago, so I kind of liked it. No, but it's a funny little place. But I'd recommend you go and see it.
I'd love to see it. I haven't done that, and people tell me it's bucket list stuff. You've got to do it. You do some stage shows. Your daughter coined the phrase "mad." Just tell us about that, and a little of what we've discussed here in the podcast is shared through that. They're great, aren't they? And it's your life and time on track and off it.
Yeah, it is. We kind of sat down with my lovely daughter Francesca Parrish, who is now, I better not say her age, but she's due to get married, I think, next year. And she's got my spark, and I wanted to do a theatre show travelling around. The reason I wanted to do a theatre show, because Carl Fogarty and James Whittam kind of started before me, and they'd go around doing a kind of chat show between them. And they'd run out, and I used to get this from James. He said we'd run out with half an hour to go, so we had to use all your stories up. I'm going, yeah, come on it, mate, that's not fair. Not only did they use my stories, they used to get them wrong, and I had people come up to me going, oh, you remember that time when you dressed up as Barry Sheene because he was drunk? I was saying he wasn't drunk, his leg locked up. So, that was kind of, so I thought, sod this, I'll go and do my own. So I spoke to my daughter and I said, look, this is the plan. I've got an agent called Mike Rowland who does some stuff with me, and we hatched a plan that we'd do a tour, and what are we going to call it? And so it's all about mad things. So Frankie said, well, how about call it the Mad Tour, which stands for My Adolescent Dad. and that's exactly what she thinks I am. So that's exactly what happened 6 years ago now. We started off doing it, and it was lovely. It was the best thing I've ever done in my life. apart from racing motorcycles, because I was working with my daughter and we grew kind of much, much closer. We laughed, we giggled, and we cried, because the tour is about, the life and times, but I've had a lot of sad times as well. So I laugh a lot, but I also cry a lot, because I've lost so many good mates, including, that horrible time when we lost the great Barry Sheene. And so there's some sad times in it as well. And it's really about the way my life, and peaks and troughs, the way things have gone and everything else like that. But I have to tell you, on occasions, my daughter Frankie now lives in Geneva, so she can't always get back. So my wife now does it. So we've kept the MAD, because instead of standing for my adolescent dad, it's now my arsehole darling. So we kept the same initials for it. So my wife does it on occasion. So it's just as embarrassing telling all your stories to your wife as it was to your daughter. So and every show changes, because it evolves different things, and I talk about certainly different subjects. But the easiest way to describe the Mad Tour, it's when PC stood for pulling crumpet. Now, you might not know what crumpet is, but Barry Sheene always used to call pretty girls, let's go and get the crumpet. So that's where that comes from.
I've been treated to a little slice of the show, which I love. One of the yarns that you've sprinkled over time is that you have a business card that says Steve Parrish. What is it? NLAM.
Yeah, it is. That's the normal business card, but I always have on the bottom of it NLAMN, which stands for no letters after my name, because when you get chucked out of school at the age of 15, you're not likely to get any letters after your name. But it does also have PhD on it, which is actually real, because I did some Pizza Hut delivery when I was about 16 years old. So. But, funnily enough, we go back to Mercedes-Benz. When they used to pay you back in the days, there was no backs and things like that. I'd get checks through Steve Parrish, NLAMN, PhD. And I used to tell them it was some engineering degree, and they never did know. It's and people often do think I've got some sort of title. Can you imagine me getting a title? There's not a chance in the world.
To the point where you helped John Hopkins, the motorcycle racer, at one point. He's injured with some broken ribs or something. Tell us that.
Yeah, that was on a flight coming back from Motegi in Japan. The Japanese Grand Prix had been held there, and poor old John Hopkins had got broken ribs. Gets on the flight to go home, the same flight I was on, and I had to get back. I had a meeting. My co-commentator at the time, Charlie Cox, was desperate to get back, and the British Airways flight that goes back in takes most of the Europeans, they go via London to Madrid or Barcelona. So we're sat on the plane at about 20 to 12, and Hopkins comes charging on there, but very carefully, because he's broken 3 ribs, and I think he's got a cracked collarbone and everything, so he's a bit second-hand. As he gets on the plane, he announces he's got broken ribs, and the cabin director was listening into what was going on, and one of the stewardesses mentions that she's been told that Hopkins can't put his bag up on the locker because he's got broken ribs. She grasses him up. Cabin director comes up and said, "I'm very sorry, Mr. Hopkins, but we cannot take you on this plane. British Airways policy is to not fly anyone that's got broken ribs, because the pressure changes and perhaps punctured lungs and things like that." And I'm thinking, oh Jesus, this is going to be a bloody nightmare. They're going to have to chuck him off, chuck his luggage off. We'll be an hour delayed. We'll lose our slot. And I'm talking to Charlie. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I said, well, leave it to me. I've been listening. So I trotted over, and he was in a different aisle, just over the aisle to me. I said, excuse me. I said, I've been listening, putting on my best voice, of course. I've been listening to this conversation, and I said, I can't believe you're not flying Mr. Hopkins, because I've already examined him and he's perfectly okay to fly in my best doctor's accent. And they said, oh, right, well, this is what's gone on. I said, yes, I examined him at the circuit. He's perfectly okay to fly. So they then call the captain. The captain comes down. He said, I understand from my cabin director that you're a doctor. He said, have you any proof of that? I said, well, I'm a consultant. I said, here's my business card, which he looks at. It's Steve Parrish, NLAMN, PhD. So it all rung in. Oh, he said, well, if you're willing to sign under what I'm going to write here now, and he wrote on the back of a menu, BA 007, Tokyo, London, John Hopkins in 6B's got broken ribs, but Dr. S. Parrish, NLAMN, PhD, and he says, if you'll sign this to say he's clear to fly, we can take off. Well, I'm getting an ear bashing from my producer from BBC, Belinda Rogerson.
Who would have been freaking out?
Yeah, she was completely freaking out. And Charlie Cox even thinks I've gone a bit far. Susie Perry wasn't sure what the hell was going on. So anyway, sure enough, doors closed, we pushed back. Hopkins putting his thumb up, are you a drink? And this, and I don't think I've ever got the drink off him. So, and I'm thinking I've probably gone a bit too far, but I'll keep my head down. So I'm having something to eat, 11-hour flight. So with 9 hours to go, I've got my bed down, get my blanket out, having to sleep. Bit nervous, as you can imagine, a little bit of trepidation going on, thinking I've lied about being a doctor, and I don't know if there's any penalty for that. And now I get a tap on the shoulder. Cabin director comes back. Dr. Parrish. I said, yes. I said, he said, we've got a problem at the back of the plane. Well, I all but shat myself there and then. You can imagine my producer who sat behind me going, I told you so, I told you so. Charlie Cox is weeing himself, as is Susie. Stavros, you've done it this time. And I'm telling the cabin director, I said, well, I'm sorry I can't help you, I'm off duty. He said, no, we need you. We checked around, you're the only doctor on the plane. Would you mind coming back to my cabin, my little office, and we can sort this out? And I'm thinking, oh, Jesus, I've got 3 options. Lock myself in the toilet for 9 hours. Say I'm not really a doctor and I was just kidding, because we're already 2 hours into the flight. Surely they're not going to turn back. Or I have a go at seeing what the problem is. And I'm thinking it's going to be a baby, heart attack, kidney infection. I think, geez, well, why not? I might as well have a go. You never know. So I go back into there, and I am really, really very nervous. And I go in there, and I have done, I've watched TV, and they have a thing called Casualty on TV, so I know a little bit about medical issues. As it turns out, and this is the luck of Parrish, Sheene always said if I fell in a cesspit, I'd come up with a salmon on my head. He was absolutely right. All it happens to be is there's a drunk Spanish bloke down the back of the plane that's causing havoc with all the passengers and the staff and everything else, and he wants more vodka and everything else. Would you mind going back and certifying he's drunk, because he's on a connecting flight going, when he gets to London, he's going to transfer to a flight to Barcelona. And we've had enough of him, so we want him arrested at London. And the only way he can have that done, he said, if we get a certification from a doctor that he's properly inebriated and drunk. I said, well, look, under the circumstances, I'm going to help you out. I said, orthopaedics are more my thing anyway, but I'm going to help you out on this one occasion. You don't pester me anymore. I don't care what goes on. I've got operations to do when I get back to London, and I need to get some sleep. So I said, I'm going to help you. So I go down the back, and sure enough, there's this bloke waving his arms, ordering more vodka and everything else. When I get down there, it only turns out to be one of the Dorna cameramen, and Dorna are the people that own MotoGP, that I'd worked with, and you probably would have worked with some of them yourself. It's flipping Manuel, who's the cameraman. He's going, hey, Steve. And I'm thinking, shit, he's going to blow my cover here. So I had to make it, I'd never met him before, and I had to poor old man, well, I had no choice but to certify he was completely drunk, and he did get arrested when we landed at London. But I've never been more keen in my whole life, and to this day, to get off an aeroplane, because I'm thinking I am going to get into serious trouble. When we land, I've got my coat on, I've got my backpack on, I'm pushing and shoving. I'm already still getting an ear bashing from Belinda Rogerson, who's telling me I shouldn't be doing this whilst working for BBC and British Broadcasting.
This gets out into the media.
Yeah, and I'm saying to her, well, sod it, I work for BBC Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it's Monday, so sod off. So I'm queuing up, and sure enough, I can see, as you're getting off, there's a policeman stood there, and I wasn't sure it was for him or me, for Manuel or for me. So I'm pushing and shoving. They let 747, they let first class passengers off first. Captain Steve Waring has come down to say goodbye, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying British Airways, we hope to see you again. And I'm there first to the business class. As I come past, Captain Steve Waring puts his hand out, he says, love your commentary, the bastard knew all along that I wasn't a proper doctor.
Oh, mate, fantastic. We're getting towards the end here. I want to do a couple of fun yarns before we wrap up. I think I'd like to finish with Baz, because it's been such a significant part of your life, and a little bit for mine, and people listening treasure him in so many ways. Firstly, a quick story about the time you were going to dinner with Lee Diffie. I can't remember the country that you were in. You were a little bit lost, but you decide to make the big grand entrance in the car. Did you drive down some stairs? Please do not try this at home, but apparently you did. Is this true?
Yeah, we did. I think we were a bit late and something like that, and we were going to this press function, and there was... most of the journalists are pretty boring, aren't they? You know? So we decided that... Well, I didn't actually mean to. I think I arrived a bit too fast, and there was a set of stairs in front, and as soon as I saw them, I thought, I reckon we can make this. And hire cars are built for that, aren't they? Every one of them comes with a certificate to say it can go rallying or down a set of stairs. Yeah, we did. And then the car managed it. It did okay. The exhaust wasn't real good afterwards, but it made it better on the journey home. So, yeah, Diff had a few kind of scary drives I guess you could say we had a few scary trips on occasion.
Life with You is mad, appropriately the name for your shows. I've seen some funny stuff with you sticking fart machines like a teenager into cornflakes in hotel restaurants and scaring some poor patron who's, going up for morning breakfast. He tells a good yarn about you writing notes in a restaurant, giving them to the waiter and trying to get it delivered to someone else, and it's stuff like see you out back later for a bit of a kiss or whatever. He says it backfired one time and a guy pulled a knife on you. Is that what happened there?
Well, actually, that's two stories in one. A guy did pull a knife on me in a restaurant in Valencia because I'd got a fake mouse that I have.
So you put this thing on and you pull the...
Yeah, there it
Here it is. Oh, no.
There's the fake mouse that comes flying across.
So you pull... It's got like a bit of fishing line.
It's got like a note snatcher. And anyway, there's this guy in a restaurant who was clearly, I think, trying to propose to his pretty girlfriend. She was quite pretty, and she was like on a table next to me, or he was. And I thought, we'll have a bit of fun here. And I said to Diff, watch this. Susie Parrish sat there with me, and a whole bunch. There was probably 15 of us. It was Sunday night after the Grand Prix, having some dinner and having a few glasses of wine and stuff like that. And it got a bit quiet, and I thought I'll liven it up a bit. So I lean around the corner, chuck this fake mouse on a piece of retractable string across, and it lands on this fella's plate. At which point, he screams and jumps up on his chair, I think much to the delight of the sort of girl that was staring into his eyes, and probably slightly embarrassing for him because she still sat there and this bloke was stood up on the chair screaming. And I could see him, he sort of realised that it was me. Gives me a right nasty stare and everything else. I've probably ruined the moment. He's probably got away from getting married, actually. He owes me one. So I decided the best thing to do is to clear off out because he was giving me some dirty looks. So I go up the stairs to the toilets and hung around there for about 5 minutes and came back down wearing my Billy Bob teeth so he didn't recognise me, or hoping he didn't. As I come down the stairs, he clearly has still clocked me, must have seen the BBC shirt or something like that, and comes at me with a steak knife. I swear to you, he's going to stab me because clearly I think the girl had left in disgust or whatever. I don't know what had gone on. And I've now got a chair and I'm fending a bloke off.
Like a lion tamer.
Yeah, it was like the lion tamer. And in fact, I have to give it to Susie Perry because she was smart as you like. She comes over and she's now calling me Chairman Mouse as it was. Anyway, yeah, that was exactly right. But the fart machine did get me in some troubles and bits and pieces and stuff like that as well. So yeah, I've spent my life getting into trouble, I guess you'd say.
You have. There are some great fun yarns, and people can read about those too, mate. Because in addition to the Barry book, which we'll talk about in a second, you have a book out right now. Parrish Times, Life as a Racer, and it's about all this kind of stuff, isn't it? About the on track, but also about your character, and clearly you are one.
Yeah, and I'm very, very proud, and we go back to Bazza again. I knew I was going to write a book for many, many years ago. I just knew, because I wrote bits and pieces down. I kept kind of a bit of a diary of my life, and it's been a fun life, and I thought that people might like to enjoy it. So way, way back, and in fact, terribly tragically, Barry wrote the foreword to this in 2003 when he was ill, and I kind of...
It was the year he died.
Yeah, the year he died, and the time I was out there, probably 3 or 4 months before he died, and I said I was going to write a book, and good on you, Stavros, it'll be fun, and so the foreword is by my lovely mate that I sadly missed, and I knew I was going to write something, just because, but my book's nothing like any other motorcycle racer's book, simply because it's not about, and I read a lot of books and I enjoy them, and the world champions that write them, and I was at Hockenheim and I got 3rd, I would have got 2nd, but the clutch was slipping, and then I went on to so-and-so and I won this and I did that. I think all that's told because if you follow it, you know it. Mine is more about the trips going to the tracks and the things that go on in between, the fun and the daft things that went on. So it's not just for motor racing people, because I have people come up to me, and particularly wives that have read the book, and the same thing happens when they come to the shows. They thought, I won't enjoy this, but they do. So it's more about fun and the times of what went on. So I'm very pleased with the way the book has gone, and I think I've never yet had anyone come up and say they haven't enjoyed it, and I get so many emails and tweets saying funniest thing I've ever read. It's in audio as well,
which you would love. The fact that it gives someone a giggle. With Baz, he 2 world titles, obviously, there in the 70s. We've talked about it earlier in the podcast, a proper rock star. But I mean, other things too, Stavros. having sponsorships the caliber of Brutal Fabergé and Rolls-Royce. He was a Rolls-Royce ambassador, and he gave them a real kind of youthful feel, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And that's, like I say, people wanted to use him. He was such an ambassador for what we were doing. He was the Cockney kid that made good, and I think everyone loves someone that comes up from very little and does that job. Yeah, you're right. He had Fabergé and he had Marlborough and he had jeans companies, and he took... Pretty much before him, all we ever had was Ferodo, Reynolds Chains and Shell. That was kind of what it was. And he was the guy that brought out all these other sponsors because he mixed with people that wanted to be part of that, be part of the success that went on with it. So he's somebody that actually opened up the doors to motorcycling. And whether you loved him or hate him, he did a lot of good for motorcycling. He lifted it out of the doldrums of black-leathered people going around the racetrack to being on the front covers of newspapers. And he had a TV show called Just Amazing that went on. And This Is Your Life, that was it. Yeah, he was on that. Eamon Andrews and things like that. They had got an MBE. Just so annoying that he's not here. I mean, that sounds ridiculous thing to say, but we would have had so much more fun, I guess. We'd have stretched it out even more. But actually, we might have been in prison again, though.
You might have. I mean, it's crazy to think how much time has elapsed since. It seems like yesterday. Tragically, he was in his early 50s, and I often think now what he would be like. Would he embrace social media, for example? Would he have been a character in that sort of space? And we're at a classic meeting recording this. He would love being here for this style of thing, wouldn't he?
Yeah, I think he probably would. But then, I'm like you. I often think how he'd like. But he wouldn't like being old, would he?
Not at all.
He wouldn't have been a good old pensioner like I would be. I don't think. I'm sure he would have coped with it most admirably, but he wouldn't have much liked it. But I'm sure he would have. He'd have everyone running around after him, wouldn't he? What would we be doing now? Oh, Rusty, go and get that for us, will you? Yeah, go and do that for us, mate, would you, or something like that?
He'd still be ticking along just fine financially too. He did super well for himself. He one time, we were all out, the Network 10 crew, and we're in Brisbane, and he bought us all dinner. He made coffee. He was very particular about his coffee. He would quite often go behind the bar and he would make the coffee himself or whatever. And anyway, the end of the night came. He goes, "Here you go, fellas, no, leave it. I've got it." And he pulled out the credit card and he paid for it. And I remember ringing my mum and I went, "Mum, Barry Sheene bought me dinner." I was chuffed. And the next day, our boss from Network 10, David White, arrived, and I said, "Chief," I said, "Baz paid for dinner." And he said, "Oh, I know." And I said, "What do you mean you know?" He goes, "He faxed through the receipt this morning for reimbursement." Let's finish on one final yarn. We've had a ripping chat here, and a lot of what I talk about is about the cars and the bikes that are significant in life and things like that. You love a stitch up, that is clear. But you have also been stitched up by a television program in the UK. You mentioned you had an armoured car before and things like that. So you get home to wherever it was at one point in time. Tell the audience about the show and what you were confronted with.
Yeah, we had, back in the 80s, a program called Beadle's About, and it was Jeremy Beadle. He was this guy that'd go around catching people out, and he'd do lots of things like steal, set your car on fire or take the engine out of your car and do daft things and things like that. So a consortium of bastards, I guess you'd say, they got in touch with London Weekend Television, it was, and said, "We've got this idiot in the village." One of them was the landlord of the village pub, who was not well impressed when we went flying around the corner with the fire engine, pulled the hoses out and hosed the place out. He had to shut the pub for 2 days, so he was not at all impressed. And another buddy called John Brown, who we were always playing pranks with and bits and pieces and stuff like that. So they rang up, or they emailed London Weekend Television and said, "We've got this bloke in the village that we want to get. Would you help us out?" And they came back and said, "Yeah, we would." And they went to so much trouble. I got a phone call from Mitsui Yamaha, who I was riding for. "Need a meeting. Can you come down? If you could be here for 11 o'clock on Tuesday morning, and we've got something to discuss with him." So I get in my van at 6 o'clock in the morning, drive all the way through London down to the other side. Just before this had happened, about 2 weeks before, Loctite called me up, who were my sponsors, and said, "We've got a guy from the trade press that wants to come and do a story on the team." Unbeknown to me, it's a research guy from London Weekend Television walking around all my workshops and house, just checking out what they're going to do. So, yeah, what they did is they turned up about half an hour after I'd left, knocks on the door, sees my wife, who was pregnant with my daughter at the time, and says they're going to play this practical joke on me, and would she mind, getting involved, and so on and so on. They went around and knocked on people's doors to say, "Could you lock your animals away, because we're going to be setting off explosions and things like that." It's a massive operation. Off I go to Yamaha's. have a meeting about nothing. I thought it was a waste of bloody time. Normally they'd buy me lunch, and tight bastards didn't. So I get in the van and I drive home, and I get back having stopped at the bakery and got some donuts and bits and pieces, and I drive into my driveway as a policeman. Area's sealed off, you can't come down here. I said, don't be stupid, I live down here, this is my workshop, you can't come out. No, I just drove past him and get down the bottom, and there is a flipping war going on, a NATO exercise, armoured cars, anti-aircraft guns, tanks, people in army gear, machine guns, helicopters flying around. I'm driven into a war zone, and this bloke, another policeman down there, I get out of the van, eating my donut or something. What are you doing down there? I said, I own the flipping place. What the hell are you doing down there? And I was going to shout and scream until I saw they'd all got guns. Anyway, he wants my identification. I gave him a credit card. Just as I'm doing that, freaking great big explosion goes off behind me, blowing up all the dirt and everything else, and I'm now cringing, thinking this is... to start with, I thought it was a joke, and then I looked at the scale of it, and I thought, nobody I know can afford a joke like this. They cannot do this. And then there's another explosion. Then, like an idiot, I've got a tin hat on, and I'm creeping around. Then another, and they blew another bit up that looked like my workshop had gone off. And I'm freaking out. I am absolutely freaking out what's going on. And to cut it fairly short, they're going, oh, yeah, we're at Gatlian Farm. I said, you're not at frigging Gatlian Farm, you're at Church Farm. And this guy's going, oh my God, cease fire, we're at the wrong location. And another explosion goes off. And they've properly got me hook, line and sinker. The next thing, Jeremy bloody Beadle drums down in a motorbike and sidecar with my mate John Brown, all with hats on and goggles on and everything else like that. And it's a full-on setup. They got me, absolutely nailed me properly. And I'm never going to get anyone back like that. And sure enough, it was a wonderful setup. It was amazing, actually. I'm really proud of it. But I got Brownie back on a few occasions, so it's still going on, actually. Just recently, Rusty, I went to his house for dinner, supper, 6 of us, my wife and another couple, and I'm sat round a dinner table in the kitchen, like a kitchen supper. He'd spent all day long wiring up Goodrich wire hosing under the table, screwed it underneath the table, pointing at my bollocks, my nuts, connected to a fire extinguisher, high-powered fire extinguisher. As I went to drink my coffee, he blew me clean off the chair with about 3,000 PSI. Looked like something out of the Exorcist. I just flew across the flipping room. This is the sort of thing that goes on in my life.
Spending time with you, mate, is like spending time with Baz. With a child. It reminds me so much of that. It's a life lived full, but there's still so much more that you're going to do, and many more laughs that you'll create. I love the fact that you're doing some classic racing like that. Keep doing that stuff, and thank you for spending time with us. Just awesome.
And I just want to say, Rusty, you are a true professional. You do your research so well. You smile and you laugh, and you're part of it. And it's a pleasure talking about this, because I still, even having spoken about things like this, I still giggle and laugh about it. And I hope I never grow up, and don't you?
No, that's how it should be. Cheers.
Rusty's Garage is written and presented by me, Greg Rust. Series producer and editor is Alex Mitchell. Audio production by Darcy Thompson.
Listener.